Hey guys, welcome back. We are doing lesson 8 in Wit and Wisdom. So let's get started with practicing our fluency. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So you should already have this downloaded. If it's not in the instructions area for each lesson, then I have it up at the top for Wit and Wisdom materials. Okay, so Seven Blind Mice by Ed Young. Now I see that something is as sturdy as a pillar, supple as a snake, wide as a cliff, sharp as a spear, breezy as a fan, stringy as a rope, but all together the something is an elephant. Now remember, with this fluency homework, you should be practicing this nightly. You don't have to turn it in to me to where I see that you're doing this, okay? Practice with somebody there at your house, okay? Fluency, remember, it's the way you talk. You don't want to be too fast and you don't want to be too slow. You need to read it the way you talk, okay? So practice, because practice your reading, it makes perfect, okay? So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, so let's talk about our essential question. Our essential question, what can we discover about animals' unique features? And we've been talking about features being like your ears, your toes, your fingers, your nose, your mouth, right? Great. Well, our focus question is, what lesson can we learn through stories about animals? We've been learning a lot from animals about the ants and the grasshopper. Remember that story? The ants were working, the grasshopper was playing, and he wanted food, but he didn't have any because he played before he worked. So that lesson was, you need to get your job done before you play. Then we've talked about the hare and the tortoise. The hare thought he could beat the tortoise by laying down and taking a nap, but the tortoise kept going. He didn't give up, and he won the race. So that lesson was, don't give up, right? Because he kept going, kept at a steady pace, and he won that race. So our content framing question, what is the lesson of Seven Blind Mice? So we're going to try to figure out what the lesson is for this story. So in this lesson, we're going to interpret the essential meaning of this story, okay? We're going to use the oval chart, and we're going to choose what details best support that. We're going to use our knowledge gained from this lesson of Seven Blind Mice to help write our own paragraph about this fable. Okay, so I am going to reshare my screen here. Okay, and we are going to, let me move this here. Going to go to our lesson, and we are going to listen to our lesson being taught. Okay.
Hello, first grade friends, and welcome back to Wit and Wisdom in Sync. My name is Tanisha Spears, and I'm excited to jump into our lesson. But before we do, let's make sure you have all of your materials ready. For this lesson, you will need your copy of Seven Blind Mice, if you have one, handout 2A, which is the topic sandwich chart, your Wit and Wisdom in Sync journal, and a pencil. We will also go over the focusing question task assessment, but I'll show that on the screen for you. Pause the video if you need to gather your materials.
Okay, now the sandwich chart is up at the top in your instructions, in your Wit and Wisdom materials, okay? And I also have a copy of it that I will share too when we get to that point.
In our previous work, we discussed characters, actions, and learned about the importance of speaking and writing in complete sentences. And today, think about important messaging and details, as well as writing informative paragraphs. I want to remind you that the learning and thinking you are doing each day while reading these fables is helping you build your knowledge to answer the focusing question, which is, what lessons can we learn through stories about animals? I'd like for you to read it with me this time. What
Lessons can we learn through stories about animals?
And the question that will frame our learning for today is, what is the important message of text, specifically thinking about 7 blind mice? I'm going to read the question that will frame our learning for today one more time. And as I read, I will read along with me.
What is the important message of this text?
Remember, in this text, the important message is a lesson that the author wants us as readers to learn. And for our work today, we'll think about how the colorful mice figured out that they were touching an elephant and what lessons the mice learned. To help us figure out the lesson, let's review key events from the story. What I'd like you to do is take a moment and look at the story map on the screen. And I want you to think, what key events do you remember from the story? Share with your learning partner.
So what do we remember? We know the characters, right? So we know there were all these colorful mice and we know there was an elephant, right? Good. We know the setting. The setting was at the pond, right? Good. What was the problem? Remember, the mice couldn't figure out what the strange something was. They all thought it was something different. And then they all told the white mouse, and the white mouse ran all over this strange something and figured it out, didn't he? He solved the problem by looking at the whole picture. He figured it out that it was an elephant. So let's see if we're right.
Here's what I remember. And as I share, I want to see if my thinking matches yours. 7 blind mice noticed a strange something by their pond. The 6 colorful mice explored the strange something one by one. They all thought it was something different. For example, one mouse thought it was a snake, another was a fan. The problem was that they didn't know what it was. And they didn't figure out until the white mouse ran over the whole elephant. The white mouse realized it was an elephant, and the other mice then ran over the elephant and agreed with the mouse. Now that we've reviewed the key events from the story, let's think about what possible lessons we could learn from the story. Here are 2 possible lessons. Being last is the best. Knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. Remember, a lesson has to have key details from the text to support it. And as I think about the first lesson, being last is the best, I can think of many details that support that. I don't remember any details when the mice said being last was the best. Let me think about the second lesson. All the parts will help you figure out the whole. Let's see if we can find details to support this lesson. We read about how each mouse explored one part, but couldn't figure out what the strange something was. Now, that supports this lesson because it shows the mouse needed to explore all the parts to figure out the whole. Now, you are going to think of some more details from the text to support this lesson. Remember, in the previous video, we talked about the action of the colorful mice. And we talked about what the white mouse did. Think for a minute. What did the white mouse do?
Did he not?
Now think. Could details about what the white mouse did support this lesson? Remember, the lesson is knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. Now, think about the details from the story just a little bit more. And if you have the book, you can look through it again for more details. When you are done thinking, you can draw or write some details that support the lesson. And remember, the lesson is knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. Remember, you're going to write about details that help us understand the lesson. Are you ready? Pause it now to write details that support the lesson of knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Knowing all the parts help us find out the whole. We know that each mouse explored one part, did they not, of the elephant, and they all thought it was something different. And then the white mouse found out all the parts, and he figured it out that it was an elephant because he ran all over the elephant. He explored the elephant as a whole. Let's see if we're right.
Now, I bet you thought of several details that support this lesson. I wonder, did you know how the white mouse explored all the parts?
That's what we
and how
just
he figured out it was an elephant because he explored the whole elephant. I'm sure you did. Remember, fables usually end by telling readers the lesson. So let's read the lesson from the text now. Knowing in part may make a fine tale, but wisdom comes from seeing the whole. I'll read it one more time. Knowing in part may make a fine tale, but wisdom comes from seeing the whole. Now, in this fable, tale is another word for story, and wisdom means having knowledge about something. And when you learn new things, you gain wisdom. Now, take a look at the chart on your screen. You've seen us use this before. The middle column is the lesson that we identified today. And the third column, or the column on the right, includes the lesson from the fable. We'll continue thinking about the lessons of the fable as we are working on writing next. Remember, the lesson we identified was knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. And the lesson from the text is knowing in part may make a fine tale or story, but wisdom comes from seeing the whole. Before we jump into writing, I want you to pause the video to take a moment to stretch or just take a quick break. When you're done, unpause the video.
Okay, stretch. Oh, good.
Okay, friends, now you are going to use the information and the skills that you've gained over the past few lessons to help you answer the focusing question task. Take a look at the focusing question task that you see on your screen. I'd like for you to read the prompt with me. Write an informative
paragraph stating the lesson of the fable, Seven Blind Mice.
Let's read it one more time. Write an
Informative paragraph stating the lesson of the fable, Seven Blind Mice.
Checklist for success. Be sure to include the following in your response. A topic statement that names the text and states the lesson. 2 or more details from the text that support the lesson. A conclusion, and complete sentences that begin with a capital letter and end with a punctuation mark. To prepare us for this, let's take a moment and review our topic sandwich chart that you used previously. Remember, when we are writing informative paragraphs, we start with our topic statement, and then we include information or the facts and the details, and we end with the conclusion. Now, let's review the lesson we identified today, and I want you to read along with me. Knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. Now, look at the sentence on the screen. The lesson of 7 blind mice is, you can use this sentence frame to orally rehearse your topic statement for your paragraph. The lesson of 7 blind mice is, pause the video now to orally rehearse your topic statement.
Okay, so let's rehearse this. So your sentence on your paper, not today because we're orally doing this, should say the lesson of 7 blind mice is knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. So that's going to be your topic sentence. And then you will have details that will go along with that. Okay? So let's continue on.
Now I want you to think, where can you find the details to support your topic statement? Where can we find details to support the topic statement?
Where can we
That's right.
find it?
Go back
The
into
book.
the text. Here are a few details that I pulled out. The mice each went to one part. They did not know what it was. The white mouse went to all the parts. He knew what it was. Now, you are going to practice rehearsing a detail.
Okay, so let's think of a detail that we could use in our story. Because right now we have the lesson of the 7 blind mice is knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. So what is a detail that we could put about knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole? We know that the white mouse explored the whole elephant, didn't he? He explored all of the parts, correct? Yes. And then he knew what it was.
Pause the video now to rehearse one of the details aloud.
We've already paused. So knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole.
We have practiced the topic statement and some details. What's next?
The conclusion.
What's the last part of an informative paragraph?
Conclusion, right? Yep.
Tell your learning partner. I'm sure you guessed it. The last part is the conclusion. Here's a sentence frame you can use to write your conclusion. Remember, the blank lines in the frame are where you would complete your thoughts. Knowing in may make a fine tell, but wisdom comes from seeing the
blank.
I want to remind you, you learned the lesson from the story by reading it from the text. And also remember, the conclusion restates the topic statement or the lesson. And we're using the lesson we discussed for the topic statement and including the lesson from the book for the conclusion sentence. So your conclusion would be, knowing in part may make a fine tale, but wisdom comes from seeing the whole. Okay, now it's time to put it all together. You're going to practice the whole paragraph, but don't worry. You can point to the parts of the topic sandwich chart as you are practicing. You can also always go back to the video if you need help remembering the sentence frames. During the next lesson, you'll write a complete informative paragraph that will include all the components from the topic sandwich chart. Pause the video now to practice the whole paragraph.
Okay, so we're not recording today, we're just rehearsing today. Okay, so let's look at our paragraph. It says the lesson of 7 blind mice is knowing all the parts will help you figure out the whole. Our detail will be the white mouse found out what the strange thing was by looking at all the parts. Knowing in all may make a fine part. Knowing in part may make a fine tale, but wisdom comes from seeing the whole. Good.
All right, awesome first graders. Nice job working on an informative paragraph that will teach others about the lesson of 7 blind mice. Next time, we'll continue working on our focusing question task. Until then, be kind, do something great, because you are capable of greatness.
Okay, so let me stop share. I don't want to stop sharing yet. I guess I do. There I am. All right, so we worked hard on rehearsing that paragraph. So that paragraph is what we are going to write tomorrow when we do our lesson, okay? Today was just a rehearsal. So we will write it tomorrow and I will have it written down for us for you to help put on your paper, okay? So no worries there. No worries there. Okay. So that is the end of our lesson today. So until tomorrow, be good.